Hello everyone, my name is Tony Morgan and I'm the Editor-in-Chief of SC Magazine. Welcome to today's webinar, Using Augmented Intelligence to Address the Human Element. Today's information-rich enterprise needs a 360 view of its data under 24-hour analysis to spot anomalies and actions that contravene agreed policies and behaviours. In essence, the who, what, when and where of your critical data. And when it comes to the who, you need to identify and address the human element in your network security to safeguard your organisation, its customers and your staff. So how do you spot a criminal operating on your network with legitimate credentials and avoid blaming innocent staff, or catch the malicious staff who have gone bad? By using augmented intelligence to leverage brain power with processing power, combining human experience with machine-powered pattern recognition in big data to multiply the results achieved by your best staff. To explain and provide deeper insight into the topic, our speaker today is Dr. Jamie Graves, founder and CEO of ZoneFox. Jamie is a data security and enterprise software entrepreneur and is the CEO of ZoneFox. He attended the prestigious Ignite course at Cambridge University's Judge Business School and the Entrepreneur Development Program at MIT. Jamie has a PhD in computer science, extensive security and digital forensics experience, and was recently recognised as the Champion of Champions at the inaugural Scottish Cyber Security Awards for his contribution to the industry. We'll have Q&As following Jamie's presentation, and you're welcome to ask questions via the interface at any time. Welcome, Jamie. We're pleased to have you with us.
Thanks, Tony. Thank you for having us here. As a fantastic introduction that really helps summarise what we're going to cover in this particular presentation, which is how do you get the best out of the information you collect from your organisation? How do you do the best with limited resources, whether that be people or actual technologies and various other aspects, and how do you gain these insights? And as you said, we think of augmented intelligence and we promote that as our main philosophy, which is in order to make best of the people within your organisation, you need smart systems to help them do their very best. Before I get into the slide deck, just a quick overview of ZoneFox. ZoneFox is the UEBA, or User Entity Behavior Analytics platform. It allows you to be alerted on potential malicious activity and allows you to do threat hunting as well. So you can get rapid insights into what's happening across your organisation. And we do that in two ways. We use rules for the known compliance aspects, and we'll go into part of that in the presentation where rules sit within the organisation and their relevance today, and machine learning components. So a subset of artificial intelligence. Machine learning allows you to build up a profile of what's going on across your systems. And we'll give you a bit more of an insight there. But before that, let's think about the problem for a second. Think about some of the challenges that organizations have in terms of detecting insider activities. And really this slide here provides us a bit of an insight. This is Robert Hanssen. And Robert Hanssen used to work at the FBI. Robert's currently serving a number of life sentences in super high security maximum prison in the US. Was it that Robert did? Well, Robert, for about 20-odd year period, leaked FBI secrets to the Soviet and then Russian intelligence services. He would get involved in spy stuff, going and doing cold drops in parks in the middle of winter in brown envelopes. And part of what he received in return was about $1 million in terms of payments from the Russians. These payments would be money or gold or jewelry or various other artifacts as well. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, that's very interesting, £1 million, but that's over a 20-year period. And that's not a lot of cash if you take into account the fact that you are betraying your organization, your colleagues, the country that you're working for. And so when you start to dig into Robert Hanssen's case, you start to understand that there are other factors at place, more than just the monetary factors. If we look at the case from the facts, we see that Robert had a family. The family lived in New York, not a particularly cheap city to live in over the past 30 years or so. And he and his wife enjoyed social interaction. They enjoyed a good life. They enjoyed themselves. And so £1 million would certainly go a long way to helping fund that form of lifestyle. But it doesn't capture the entire essence of what went on with Robert. And in order to understand, we've got to understand that. We've got to dig slightly more into what Robert was like as an employee and an individual within the FBI itself. Robert was a smart guy, and Robert knew he was a smart guy. And he was constantly full of really interesting ideas, or at least he thought they were interesting in order to help the organization excel at what they were trying to do. But throughout his career, he always felt as if he was passed over for promotion. He felt as if he was being ignored by his higher-ups. So, for example, in the early 90s, he suggested installing things called PCs within the FBI to help data management and mine through things far faster. And his bosses thought better of it and said, no, we're not going to do that. And there's this constant set of overlooking, constant set of feeling undervalued that led Robert into a state where he could be approached by the Russians and be groomed by them in order to help them fulfill their particular goals and objectives. Robert was approached by the Russians who groomed him, who said, you are smarter than these people. You can show them how much smarter you are by leaking this information to us. They'll never find you out because you're better than them. How about you come on board? And that's precisely what happened. They groomed him and they allowed his sense of disillusionment, probably working in combination with his ego, in combination of his disgruntlement, in order to leak these particular documents over that period of time. And it's really Robert that helps provide us a bit of a case study into some of the psychological factors that you need to understand. There's always some form of drive or motivation or objective that your employees may engage in order to steal information from your organization. But there are other factors as well. And this slide provides an insight into really the three main threat profiles you may uncover within your organization. We've got malicious, we've already spoken about that. Intentional security breaches, they're motivated by psychological, monetary, or other factors in order to steal from your organization. And they are a particular brand of insider that can be dealt with in certain ways. There are certain HR policies that can be implemented. There are certain recommendations about monitoring certain behaviors in order to understand how these individuals work. And behavioral analysis certainly fits into that. But be in no doubt, it's not just a security function. As with a lot of these, you need to bring in HR, and there needs to be sufficient leadership in the organization to make sure you detect or even anticipate problems with these individuals. There's the unaware insider. So this person poses a threat to your organization because he or she hasn't been trained or is not aware of security procedure or policy in your company. A classic one is someone who clicks on a phishing email. Maybe you haven't performed phishing training or anti-phishing training within your company. An email may come from an external source. It may look legitimate. It may even include a spreadsheet that says it contains bonus or salary information. It's a classic tactic. Someone clicks on it, unwittingly opens it, deploys some form of nasty on your endpoints, and from that point onwards, you have some form of infection that requires dealing with. Other examples also include individuals who are potentially aware of security practices, but they're trying to get their job done. There's that classic contention between security and productivity, where your classic IT or security approach is just say no. But people, they're curious, people are very creative, and they can find really interesting ways of getting around the controls you may put into your organization. For example, Alice in engineering wants to be able to send documents to a client, but you've imposed a 20 megabyte limit, and you've not provided her with any secure encrypted services to send this information on. So maybe she uses a personal Dropbox drive or a cloud, some other form of cloud service. It's at that point that you've lost control of the data. And if you've provided sufficient processes or technologies within your organization, that potentially may not have happened. Your unaware insider, they can usually be caught by putting in place proper checks and balances around the controls and processes that you've installed within the company. And as such, there is a good mapping between the policies that you implement and catching these particular individuals. The third threat profile is that of the advanced or skilled insider. And from our experience and studies, it's important to note that typically insider threat is rarely skilled, so they're not going to deploy zero-day attacks against your organization. They're typically going to use their existing levels of permission, or they're going to recruit or attract individuals to help them take information, or they're just going to do it by mistake. Your advanced individual is slightly different. This is where they will use advanced strategies or tactics in order to gain a foothold within your organization and look like someone performing their day-to-day activities. And this is what a lot of people will call the low and slow approach, where they slowly gather information over a period of time and start to exfiltrate it at certain points. And this particular individual may be a nation-state actor, they may be a highly motivated criminal gang, and they are difficult to spot as well. But by using a combination of behavioral monitoring, so peer group analysis, and through a rule-based approach, it is possible to spot these individuals. But contextual information and knowledge of the organization is important in order to do so. Before we move on, I'd like to give you some insights, some ideas of the kind of individuals that may fit into one of these three categories. And the first one is Quentin. We have Quentin here, who's a security engineer. He's got access to customer data, intellectual property, technical data, commercial documents. And Quentin, as his name suggests, is about to lead your organization. And Quentin fits definitely into the malicious insider category, where he feels as if the data he will take from your organization will help him get a foot up in the new company he's about to join. And as such, he's going to download each of those types of data. He, as a psychological profile, he probably feels quite entitled to it because he works on it on a day-to-day basis. It's one of the tricky areas you'll find with the insider, with some insider threats, which is, if we're talking about, say, software engineers get very involved in the work and take certain pride and ownership of the type of work that they do, and they feel a sense of ownership as well. As such, feel as if it belongs to them. So we have individuals who are quitting organizations, they're leaving, and as such, this highlights a good integration of HR and security practices will really benefit you. When did Quentin hand in his resignation notice? Was he denied access to various critical resources? Was auditing turned on to the top level? Or had he, as most people do, collected the data prior to handing in their notice in order to anticipate any potential monitoring that may happen? The next individual is disgruntled Dave, and he's very much like Robert Hansen insofar that he's bright, ambitious. He joined the organization. In our particular case study here, Dave joined straight out of university, and he was promised certain things about the culture and the way in which things happen within the organization. And within this particular character case study, we see an individual who has found potentially a problem in the software. Maybe he's reported it to his managers and been very frustrated by the lack of response to his concerns. Potentially it's a flaw in the product that, as an engineer, he feels as if shouldn't be present. Within this particular case study, he feels undervalued and ignored. And this can lead to things like source code leakage. So if his managers aren't going to fix it, then he's going to leak the source code to the outside world so that the community can come along, inspect it, and fix it for them. And this is something we have seen across organizations before. Again, it's that psychological profile. It's how your culture deals with individuals and make sure that they feel listened to, and make sure that they feel part of the company objectives moving forward. Then we have Sandra the spy. Sandra, again, like Robert, was spying for an external organization. In this particular instance, she had financial pressures. She was blackmailed into stealing information from the organization. There may also be elements of being disgruntled in the way that Robert was with his particular seniors. But these are tactics that can be used by external agencies. So if we think about nation-state actors, or if we think about well-organized criminal gangs, They do profile people, so let's think about social media. Let's think about the kind of information we put out on the internet that can potentially be used against us. And this is exactly what happened in the case of Sandra in this particular instance. And then finally, we're talking here about the unintentional insider, or careless Caroline, who in this particular one is ignorant of security policy, not because she's not smart, but because she's not been trained. As an organization, we have not done a good enough job to let her know what should and shouldn't be done with certain processes or certain types of information. She's under pressure. Let's imagine it's Friday, it's 5 o'clock, the rest of the team are going down the pub, and you just want to get your job done. And so this may lead you to using shadow IT services like Dropbox, for example. Or she may be the victim of phishing or social engineering. As I said at the top of the deck, this is a thing that can happen when employees haven't been trained to spot some of the telltale issues with phishing emails, or even fraudulent emails where you get an email from a finance director or CEO saying, I'm stuck abroad, wire me £10,000, that would be great, that'll help me get out of a sticky situation. These emails work. Before we go any further, I'm going to go into a bit of a case study, an incident that we were involved in a company that was in the R&D sector. They did mechanical engineering, highly advanced products, and they had a number of different departments, so R&D, testing, client, and consultancy services. And this case study will hopefully bring together some of the elements we've been talking about in terms of the psychological factors, but also some of the behaviors, in terms of technical and non-technical behaviors that you can potentially pick up on in order to understand what's happening. We were asked to go in and understand how this organization was doing from a number of perspectives. One was the set of controls they had around data loss prevention, so they had USB blocking, for example. They had their internal network set up to provide least privilege, so they had good access control configured. They had connections between HR and security in terms of trying to understand the potential risks of the organization, so they had a good link between two particular profiles. So we went in and did a bit of an audit. So we went in and we installed a ZoneFox connector onto one of their engineers' machines. And the first thing that we saw was within the first couple of days, this engineer had installed a backup agent. Now, we found this interesting because we were told by the security team that they had whitelisting applications, which meant that unauthorized software could not be installed on the endpoint itself. The backup utility was then configured to basically go out, collect, and retrieve information and collate it into a single zip file. And it would do this typically early hours of the morning. This individual was showing some characteristics of wanting to collect data in a covert manner and not create too much network traffic between 9 to 5. And it looked as if they configured it in a fire and forget manner, which is certainly what we started to see in terms of some of the behavior across the systems. The data it was collecting was also of interest. This engineer was starting to collect together results of product testing, which is fine. They're an engineer, potentially they have access to that. CAD designs for prototypes, again, he was within the engineering function, so that shouldn't have been a surprise. But when we started to dig into the types of data he was collating and ripping up, we saw things like bills of material, PCB designs, which was very interesting as we wasn't on the electrical engineering team. And then finally, commercial documents like contracts and agreements with R&D partners and bills of sale, which is frankly out with his remit. So it was at this point we started to get a bit suspicious. And then finally, the last piece of insight that we saw was really how the individual exfiltrated or removed the data from the organization. They disconnected their machine from the network. They had a hunch, well, we suspected they had a hunch that they were being monitored. And after he unplugged the network cable, he plugged in a bit of removable media, which USB stick, he put the zip file containing about 182,000 different files onto it. it was at this point when we had a bit of a problem, and so we went and had a debrief with the CISO, and we provided insights into the behavior that was going on, and we provided insights into the kind of data that was going out the door. And we said, have you got any ideas? Is there any legitimate reason why this engineer should be doing this? CISO said, no, I'll go find out. And it turned out this individual had handed in their notice. However, there had been a failure of communication between HR security, so they didn't know to increase logging and auditing on this individual's activities. There'd clearly been a failure in terms of the controls that we put in place as well. Their USB blocking technology, the DLP technology hadn't worked. Their access controls were, for whatever reason, not configured properly because this individual had managed to log into different areas. And finally, their technology to allow them to understand whether applications that had not been whitelisted had failed as well. And it turned out this individual, because he was on the engineering team, had the domain admin password, which is why he managed to log into the various areas and start extracting the data and do effectively whatever he wanted. So if we roll back to information security 101, some of the basics of the hygiene, which is if you put controls in place, we need sufficient hygiene and auditing around it to make sure that they're working effectively. And this is not based on any fancy behavioral monitoring techniques. It's about making sure we understand the policies, make sure they're being enacted with technical controls, and then following up those particular controls with good auditing capabilities. And this is exactly what we spoke to the CISO about, which is when it comes to some of the insider threats, you can pick up on them because you do have the data, you can gain the insights. And some of the insights we see around this are to do with, as this individual had submitted their resignation letter, he started stealing information after that particular event. But what if they'd stolen information before they'd handed it in? Even without the HR involvement, you wouldn't have detected it. But having good hygiene around auditing your controls would have given you those insights. When we think about the case study in this engineering firm, we think about the differences in behavior. And behavior can be what we classify as technical or non-technical. These are just some examples of the behavior that you may want to audit and understand. There's a fantastic CERT blog called the Insider Threat blog. It has some fantastic objective research into the state of IT theft within the US corporations. And they've got some great insights around the kind of technical and non-technical behavior that you see within organizations. So technical, some of the ones we saw in that engineering firm were things like circumventing controls. So he did a great job. He had the domain admin password. But other ones, such as we have here, circumventing auditing or logging functions. He unplugged his network cable from his desktop, which gave us a tip-off that he was trying to be trying to avoid various auditing capabilities. Accessing sensitive files, we saw that as well. He's logging into not only the engineering file shares, but the commercial ones as well. And we didn't particularly see this, but network interface or hardware manipulation, trying to stop things from recording logging information. Non-technical indicators, things such as outside the scope of duties, unnecessarily copies material. These are the softer factors, and there's a great deal of research coming up to show that some can be fairly indicative. So earlier on today, we saw a case study of individuals who are stealing information and buying fur coats and partying all the time. But as the presenter said, they were at the stupider end of the spectrum. And those who are committed to stealing information and keeping it silent won't go out and buy a gold watch, for example, or go on fancy holidays. And that's where some of these techniques don't necessarily reliably inform us to what's going on. If you think about some of the behavior that we see within the organization, we can think about some of the ways in which data is taken from companies as well. And the interesting piece about this slide is the channels through which data is removed from the organization. But one of the little known facts that may hearten those who are trying to train their users to do data backups is if someone's intent on stealing data, they'll make a copy of it. So they'll do email and removable media, or they'll do network access and file transfer. They will make absolutely sure that they have a copy of the organization's data in order to bring it with them. So sometimes there can be telltale factors, but I think the overall point here is that it's multiple points of detection, and it's multiple areas of interest that build up into a profile of an individual that's trying to take data from your company. As such, we've put together what we would call our insider threat kill chain. Now, this is clearly based on the Lockheed Martin kill chain, which clearly describes how a motivated individual would try and get into your organization, so reconnaissance, exploitation, privilege escalation, for example. But this provides a bit of an insight into the various factors that individuals would use in order to take data from your company. So if we look at the recruitment to tipping point, by recruitment here we mean maybe they've been socially engineered or blackmailed into working for an external entity, or maybe their tipping point is they're really annoyed with their boss and they want to now show them how smart they really are. Typically there's a research and reconnaissance phase. They will know where all of their important data is, which is a tricky factor. More of that in a minute, but they may be looking at for other areas or other pots of information that provide insights. There's exploitation, which, as I previously said, isn't very sophisticated. This can usually be either knowing the domain admin password because it's common knowledge, or using various architectural elements of the organization against itself. Maybe you've got a flat network. Maybe you don't have privileged access management set up in a certain way, and therefore these exploits can be fairly low-tech in a lot of ways. If you see people starting Metasploit or scanning the network, then these things can be picked up on fairly easily using existing tools, but because exploitation is normally people leveraging the organization's weaknesses against itself, it can be hard to spot. We had the acquisition phase, as we saw. The individual in the engineering company went out, set up their particular process to go out at early hours of the morning, fire and forget. It was very much a backup strategy. And then we have the exfiltration piece, which in our particular case study, we saw an individual plug in a USB stick. But as per the previous slide, if you can, there are multiple channels for data leaving the organization itself. And if you can anticipate or stop any of these phases, so if we're thinking about search and reconnaissance, maybe an individual is poking around the network. We heard a lot about honeypots this morning. We have experience of individuals who've set up honeypots in order to understand whether people are doing that. If it's an acquisition phase, maybe you can anticipate that and speak to the individual. Why are you backing up that data? We provide a backup service. Maybe they were ignorant to it. But if all of these phases are linked together, then you may want to act upon the information and intelligence that you're getting. We've seen that rules can help us. Rules helped us with, or at least if they'd implemented the various rules, so correlation between activities, that would have given us some insights into, I guess, what you'd say is the known knowns, so policy breaches, tip-offs. But really, this statement here kind of sums up the difficulty we have with a lot of insiders that we see, which is, as it says in the CERT insider threat reports, the majority of insiders steal information that they have access to, and writing rules for that can be incredibly difficult to do. And that's where we've got to start thinking about other techniques or other capabilities that give us the insights there. And this is where we start to think about things like user behavior activity analytics. Controls can only go so far. They're part of your ecosystem, they're part of the blend that you need to put together. The rules alone cannot catch everything. If we have machine learning techniques which use statistics to build baselines of information and provide you insights into what a user and their peers get up to, you can start to get these insights. And where we are as an industry is quite a fascinating period where we've had big data, lots of people collecting lots of information about stuff. CPU cycles are now cheap. Storage is now cheap, so this data can be collected, and they can now be combined with the statistical techniques that machine learning brings on board in order to provide us with very clear insights. As it says here, no rules. It'll build a profile all by itself in order to get these insights. So in order for this to be effective, and actually this is part of the cyber threat methodology, which is seen as best practice, which is you've got to build a baseline. You've got to know what's normal and what's abnormal. So record a user activity. We promote the fact that the endpoint's the ideal place to do it, because by the time you get to the network layer, you lose the fidelity of information you get from, say, USB access or various file accesses which aren't picked up. User-based is really important, but you need to be able to compare this to their peer groups. Peer group analysis is really important to help reduce false positives. One of the problems that the early days of anomaly detection at the network layer struggled with was when they learned bad behavior and it became part of their OK model. It's really difficult to compare two network streams together. But if you have a group of engineers or a group of individuals within HR, it's fairly easy to understand and then compare their particular activities. So what does this look like? Well, we've got a bit of a visualization here of the kind of clustering that goes on when you start launching departments. So, for example, the red department in the middle could be HR, and the green department down there could be engineering, for example. And you see that you've got groups of people that cluster together because they perform the same activities. So engineering, for example, they'll be opening the development environments, they'll be checking out code, they'll be checking it in again, they'll be using things like Notepad++ in order to do potentially some additional fooling around with data outputs and so on and so forth. But they will get up to various standard behaviors and activities over a period of time. Now, where you see this orange blob down here, we've got an outlier, so also known as a bad guy. But that could also relate to a number of these departments as well, where, say, let's think about the green group. If someone is within engineering or logically divided into engineering, if they don't appear within that group, then you've got a problem. What happens if they appear in, say, peer group 2? And that's when you can start to gain insights from the large amounts of data you collect and machine learning components taking care of building that baseline for you. So what does this actually look like? A lot of vendors talk about the funneling process, which is getting data and turning it into information. And that's part of the approach that we like to take as well. We think it's highly valuable as well, where we take a high-level view. So this particular one shows you time of day, intensity, and size of risk through a combination of bar charts and also color coding here as well, with red being the really highly important ones. And then allowing the human analyst to then drill into that, into areas of interest, which then show, for example, here, the red dots turn into something like Charlotte, the engineer, has been using backup for all agent to put things onto a removable disk, for example. Because this hasn't happened before, we use a combination of machine learning and visualization techniques in order to provide these insights. And this should very much fit into what we describe as the threat investigation pipeline, which is we have the information, we put together a hypothesis, we explore the data using a fast interface in order to provide those insights rapidly, and then we get insights into how we triage the information, the next best activity, report, learn, and then feed back into a loop again. So this should really be a loop, but this threat investigation pipeline allows us to rapidly get to conclusions at each piece of the investigation. UBA is coming along. It's a great new technology. Helps you carve through large data sets, provides you in-depth use into user activities, and there's a lot of compute power out there. However, as with any new technology, we need to be cognizant of the fact that it has limitations. False positives can be an issue with some data sets. So, for example, I mentioned earlier on, network-based data anomaly detection can provide false positives because it's hard to compare two networks together. And right now, the industry seems to be applying machine learning to everything. And that's kind of like having a hammer and seeing every problem as a nail. The approach that we take and the philosophy we have is kind of like the big data problem as well. We see a lot of people putting together data lakes, terabytes, petabytes of information that at some point in the future they hope to analyze. With data at that scale, it's incredibly difficult to parse and pull out meaning without very large, high-scale computing facilities and without the necessary scripts or software to do so. And so it requires an engineered approach, both to the data you collect and the kind of algorithms or techniques you apply to it. I really think of it as using one of these screwdrivers in order to screw in one of these bolts. It's just not going to happen. And so you need to understand why you're collecting data, and specifically with relation to the insider threat, this is about what you need to pick up on, what your key risk areas and what your key risk factors. Don't collect data because it seems like a good thing to do, because you'll never get around to analyzing it at the end of the day. And if you can link an engineered data collection approach with the right analytics capabilities, you'll start to provide your operations people with a winning capability. They'll be able to enhance and get through a lot more work than being bogged down in analytics. So that's the state of the art at the moment. Just peering a little bit into the future, how do we build a truly human behavior-focused system? So think about human security analytics. And this is where we see some of the things coming up over the next year or so, certainly over the next 12 months. So thinking about deep learning, so prescriptive and predictive. Prescriptive being the next best action. We've seen Charlotte the engineer do this. We recommend blocking her accounts and potentially providing her the training or putting in place a process for her to maybe share information. Predictive analytics, being able to see a little bit into the future based on past profiles and models that we can analyze as well. So really bringing proper artificial intelligence techniques and not just a machine learning approach that a lot of vendors talk about at the moment. It's integration with external systems as well. So integrating with HR, social media, and access control mechanisms to bring things like sentiment analysis to the table in order to truly understand things like psychological and behavioral factors as well. And then finally, where we see this going is things like the integration of endpoint threat detection response and SIEM. There's a big battle going on between endpoint detection response and your classic antivirus vendors, and the same is happening with SIEM and UBA, where they are starting to integrate human analytics capabilities together. And it's likely there's going to be a consolidation in the market in the near future. I'd like to thank you for listening. Hopefully you found the slide deck of interest, and I'd be more than happy to take some questions.
Well, thank you very much, Jamie. That was a really excellent presentation. We can now take questions from our audience, and you can use the system to put your questions in. First off, though, I'd just like to ask, when we install behavioural monitoring, are we mostly looking for staff who make mistakes, or are we primarily looking for people who have malicious intentions?
I think it's a bit of both. As we saw in the slide deck, we have rules that can relate to policies, and if they're broken, then we can address that side of things. The policies and associated controls are there for a reason. If they're there for no reason, then I would question why they're there in the first place. And then the machine learning, so the statistical capabilities there to provide insights into maybe the more malicious or advanced capabilities inside your organization.
Okay, and we're usually, we're looking for unusual behaviour to prevent both criminal and clumsy behaviour. But how can we be sure that, we've found somebody doing something unusual, but they haven't just come up with a brilliant new way of doing things?
That's where, I guess, the philosophy of augmented intelligence comes in. It's about awareness before it becomes a problem. So you can approach the individual and have a discussion with them before you get to in the kill chain that we showed. It's about making sure you're aware of it before the exfiltration happens, if it ever comes to that. So it's about openness and making sure you can have that conversation within the company.
I know some organisations are a bit concerned about introducing this kind of monitoring because they're concerned about the privacy of the user. So where do we draw the line between what's reasonable security precautions and what's invasive spying? And who gets to decide where that line is drawn?
I think, so if we work backwards from that line is drawn from the the objectives of the company, so set by the board. And then that's a conversation we all need to have at recruitment and also through the various HR functions of the organisation. I think where we are right now is isn't in a great place where we do things like email, content scanning, deep packet analysis, which can be incredibly intrusive because you can pull out content and potentially pull out meaning without context. And things like GDPR will potentially and hopefully start to facilitate things like we are using this data for reason X, Y, and Z, and this maps on the corporation objective Y, for example, and that's the reason why we're doing it. We want you to be part of that process. We see organizations implementing something like behavioral analytics to help protect their employees. Cases of, say, phishing an account takeover, for example, which may lead to the obvious answer of database administrator A is stealing information, but that could have been an account compromise. So it's about having that openness, both from reporting security incidents, making sure that there's no sanctions in place or cultural blame, all the way up to the reason why you're implementing these particular solutions for your objectives.
So getting their buy-in, their trust, their understanding, and realise that it is actually ultimately to their benefit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be like having a marketing strategy that you don't tell anyone about within the organisation, and you have a marketing team that's not aware of why they're doing certain activities. It just doesn't make any sense. The same goes for technologies and processes like these.
How easy are these sorts of systems to trick? I mean, if I'm up to some sort of dodgy activity, how can I do it in a way that, not how can I do it in a way, but how do I find out if somebody's doing it in a way that follows their usual work patterns? Yeah.
Well, this is where we're looking at peer groups in order to provide a model of typical behaviours across the peer group. So you've got two models where we put together the individual one, which is historical and current behaviour, and then the behaviour of the group itself. And that typically provides insights into outlier type activities. So, for example, you check out source code, but no one else in the group ever puts it onto a USB device, for example. And that would be something that we pick up on. You're right to highlight that these techniques can be fluid. There are classes of solutions, as we've seen certainly in various industry reports. If you look at, for example, the domain of machine vision, which is this a dog or a car? Various algorithms like that can be fooled as well. And I think as an industry, we need to get better at verifying that these algorithms are working in certain ways. And that also helps the consumer as well, the organization, to properly choose one of these particular capabilities.
Okay. I mean, when you do then spot something suspicious, what does the system do? Does it actually help prevent that activity, or does it just report it? Or is it looking for a pattern of behaviour over a longer period?
It's looking for a pattern of behaviour over a longer period of time, and we will report that in a way that allows the security operations team to investigate and triage it. As I showed in the slide deck, we've got a risk score, which allows you to understand the severity of the threat. And it's from that point onwards that the individual gets the ability to then put it into their standard incident response workflow, and so on and so forth. In terms of, sorry, what was the first part?
That was the first part. You actually started to more or less answer my next question inadvertently, because what I'm actually was going to ask was whether this is just one more log, whether it's just another set of data that I haven't got time to review. Or does it actually configure the information in a way that lets me know which stuff is actually really important?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember the first part of the other question, which is, does it stop it?
Sorry, yes. And sorry, I was following on from the, does it stop it or does it just report it?
Yeah. And I think those two are interlinked as well. I think we've had data loss prevention or DLP for a number of years now, and there have been a number of failed implementations of that technology because it's been implemented in a strict rule-based manner, which can stop people from getting things done, so it can be turned off. It's also a bit of a nightmare as well, which is why we don't do any preventative actions at the moment, purely because there are a lot of controls in place. As we saw in the case study around the engineering firm, they had controls, but they weren't sure they were working. So there's almost an 80-20 rule here, which is you've got a lot of stuff in place, how are you monitoring it, how can you make better use of it to make sure it's actually working properly, and how do you get those insights into when something has happened to, as we will be doing with GDPR, responding really quickly with a plan. As for, is it another log? I would say that log files are not a great source of security information. They're there for administration capabilities. And I would say that, as per my slide on an engineered approach to data collection, we need more of that, which is, what's the problem I'm trying to solve? I'm not going to go out and just grab all the log files I can, because it's like a few pieces of a jigsaw. You need to understand what you're looking for and collect appropriate types of data to help answer those questions.
And we're talking about using machine learning here. So how long does the system actually take to get a feel for what's normal on my network? And how long before I can actually feel confident to judge the assessments of what is abnormal?
We can detect interesting things within 2 weeks. And that's based on a week's worth of profiling, just monitoring information, then a week's worth of analytics on the back of that. But we provide feedback mechanisms that allow the organization to tell the system what's useful and what isn't useful. We've brought in a tagging system as well. So if you tag, say, the HR folder, which is incredibly important, we will learn about those activities first of all. So it's very much around the organizational context that help accelerate that learning process.
Well, on the wider sort of field of artificial intelligence, something that everybody seems to be worried about is it going to take our jobs? Is it going to replace humans? To what extent does it simply augment what humans do, and to what extent does it replace humans?
I'm an optimist, so I'm going to say that it's going to be a Robocop future, not a Terminator future. The Terminator is the machines getting rid of humans, and Robocop was man and machine together in order to create something that was greater than the sum of its parts. And that's the way I see it going. There's a lot of conversation and worry about the truck drivers in the US right now, who are potentially going to be replaced by self-driving vehicles. But I don't see there being an appetite for trucks to be driven without a human to at least slam on the brakes or turn the wheel should the system fail. So I think it will help us. I think it will absolutely enhance our capabilities and provide us with, I guess, the next stage of the industrial revolution that our society requires.
Okay. Now, I understand you've got a demonstration for us as well.
Yeah.
If you want to do that, but I'll just ask you one last question. What would be the key piece of advice you would give to a company worried about insider threats in their organization?
You already have, if you've got security policies, processes, people and technology configured, then you've got a good fighting chance to detect them. You already have the capabilities and tools probably to pick up on them. You just need to make sure that communication about how you're using these tools is effective, and you should absolutely rely on the fact that the insider threat is like any other threat to your organization. It's not super unique. It can be detected, and you can reduce the risk of being exposed to it.
Thanks very much, Jamie. We'll have a demonstration.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you see my desktop? Okay. Yeah. Can you see my desktop okay? Yes. Great. So this is the ZoneFox dashboard. It's web-based. It allows you to put in various widgets, move them around, configuring it as you like. And you can see here we've got a couple of widgets set up. First of all, we're running critical alerts, and we've got a GDPR compliance status here. When we configure the system, we do a couple of things. We install connectors to your endpoints, databases, and cloud services that immediately start to stream information to our servers. And so you can quickly get insights into anything Zoomfox sees within your organization. So I've just done a search for all Word documents. You can see that a couple of rules have been built in. So these rules are based on your policy as an organization. See here we have star file upload, files backed up to the cloud. And I can start to drill into that pretty quickly. So I can click the eye there, and immediately I see that someone's been using Shadow IT, in this particular example, Charlotte the engineer, and she's been taking from the network file share engineering plans and uploading them through Skype. So we think about the slide deck that I just went through. This may be an individual who's simply trying to get a job done, and therefore may require some form of secure sharing capability. From here, we can start to delve into various other capabilities as well. So if we have a look at the network piece, let's remove Word doc there and update this, we can gain an insight into data flow in and out of the organization. So across this period, we've had some of the data uploaded and downloaded. Let's just extend this period a little bit and update that. And we start to get an insight into sources and destinations of data, the uploaders and downloaders, and then some of the behaviors itself. So Timmy the temp here has actually been uploading this secret file .docx to this CloudFront server itself here. So we could even do a search on this and actually see where it went. So we saw it was just under a gigabyte, and the file itself went to Turkey. Now, if we don't have any operations in Turkey, I'm going to start to get very worried about that. So we can get down to this nice granular level of who's interacting with your data and what they're up to. Now, earlier on, I showed you the rules-based interface. You saw a couple of examples of alerts there. So here's some other examples. So everything from data violation, such as files written to removable media. We've got Colin, contractor, Timmy the temp, and Charlotte there, through to things like checking existing controls work, such as antivirus not started here as well. So Lauren sales, her AP's not started. Now, that may be malicious, and that may just be a technical control failure. These are the known knowns. This is what you create policies, and you create various auditing capabilities around to know what's going on within your organization. We spoke a bit about AI, augmented intelligence, and machine learning. And that's where we provide you with this funnel-like interface, which starts out at the very top, which is, here are the alerts that have happened across the past couple of months, and I can now start to drill into them based on the criticality. So I want to see this large spike here, and I can now start to try and drill down into and start to get some context around what's going on. So if I have a look at this weekly view, what draws my eye is these activities that occurred on Friday morning. So from Thursday 12 a.m. Through to Friday, basically all throughout the morning, we've got this big red smear of activities. Let's click on that there, and we can see that all of this translates into 41 critical activities for Timmy the temp. Here we can provide feedback. We've kept it just like Facebook, so you can interact with it nice and easily. But in the background, we also allow you to set up, as we see, taggers that give you the ability to learn things quickly. But for this particular one, you see that Timmy, we start to drill into the actual forensic incident response data here, has had a bit of ransomware on his machine. The reason why we know that is, well, we've got this trail of devastation happening across this time of the morning, and we've got HR data, which we tagged as being important, basically being read, written, encrypted on the endpoint itself. And from here, we can start to pivot, start to understand very quickly where else in the organization. As you see in the demo here, we've got the WannaCry extension there, very topical at the moment. But we've helped organizations clear up from various other infestations as well. So there are commonalities around ransomware. For example, you've got the file that demands the cryptocurrency that they're after, and that's usually called the same thing across your estate. And as a result, we can go out and we can understand precisely which machines have been infected, help understand the extent of the response, and take it from there. If we want to have a look at other incidents as well, if we go to Monday here, we've got 10 critical alerts around law and sales. And you see for Lauren says that we've got her accessing things like financial data. So she's reading it from Network File Share. She's looking at payslips, customer invoice list, hiring list, so on and so forth. We've got a candidate here. Now, this could be Laura planning to leave the organization. A customer invoice list, maybe she should have access to that. Things like payroll and hiring list, maybe she's planning on starting up her own team outside the organization. So these can give us these insights. AI has picked up on this because she's never accessed these before. And the reason why they're coming up with a 69 percentile risk factor is the fact that we just haven't seen her interact with these files before. This may allow us to then go and have a chat with her and say, why are we accessing these particular documents? And start to engage in that particular conversation. So that's really a 50,000-foot view of ZoneFox and the capabilities we have. I could do death by feature, but I think let's pull out some of the main factors that are of interest, especially with relation to the slide deck.
Thank you very much, Jamie. That will have to be it for this session. Our thanks to Jamie Graves for sharing his insight and expertise today, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. This webcast will be available on demand on the SC Magazine website, scmagazineuk.com, under the Events tab. Thank you very much.